I'm still trying to make it, right? I'm still trying to get out there. I don't consider myself like on the level of an established writer.
This episode was originally released under the podcast titled Teaching and Learning, Theory versus Practice. This rebooted episode has been migrated to Teaching and Leading with Dr. Amy and Dr. Joy. I am Dr. Amy Viaclia, Director of Educator Preparation.
And I am Dr. Joy Patterson, Chief Diversity Officer. Our podcast addresses issues through the lens of diversity, equity, and inclusion, along with solutions for us to grow as educators.
So join us on our journey to become better teachers and leaders. So let's get into it. Good morning, Dr. Joy.
Good morning, Dr. Amy. How are you today?
I am eager to introduce this guest because we've had a partnership with a local high school for some years. And this teacher works in that high school. He's an English teacher. He's mentored several candidates as they've been preparing to be teachers themselves. But there is something I did not know, and that was his career also as a writer.
He's a local celebrity and someone that we've been partnering with.
So Kevin Kenealy received his journalism degree from Eastern Illinois University and his English secondary education certificate from Trinity Christian College. He is also pursuing a master's in English in literature from Southern New Hampshire University. He worked as a reporter and designer for several local newspapers before he started teaching English and AP literature and journalism at the high school level. He wrote his first book, 20-something, at age 23, a book of poetry about growing up in your 20s and trying to figure yourself out. I think we all needed to figure ourselves out in those early 20s. And the book was featured in a local newspaper and can be found in local libraries. He completed his first novel, Life and Death, at age 31, a horror thriller book that received local attention and is also featured in suburban Chicago libraries. And in his latest book called Neighborhood Watch, Kirkus Reviews calls it Superb Characters, headline in this chilling, slow burn crime tale. Ooh, gripping.
Oh, I know. This is actually a very good book. Angela Lansbury type of person, Murder, She Wrote. So this was very nice for me. I didn't know what to expect, especially from a teacher, like it was going to be so different. So Kevin, thanks first of all for joining us. Happy that you're taking the time to do this, but I want to know how you describe yourself. Are you a journalist who's teaching, or are you a teacher who likes to write?
I've always told people I'm a lifelong learner, and I just always soak in the world around me. And I think that comes in handy with whether you're a writer or a teacher, or obviously a student. As was introduced there, this will be like my 12th year as a student. My next year will be my 8th year as a teacher. I can't get out of education. So, I love that side of it. And I think that really helps me as a writer too, because you really see a lot of different things. You really see a lot of different avenues, both in the reading world and in the environment world, which I saw in journalism, because there's always a story out there. You just have to be attentive to the world around you, which writers do. And so I can bring that into the classroom and just kind of tell students that be attentive to what's around you and soak up the world. And there's more to life than just what's in the textbook.
I love your modesty. You're so very broad. I was actually looking for you in an email, and I saw an email. One was about partnership. One was about you being a student. I'm giving you CPDUs, professional development units, for being such a great partner to Governor State University. Then I sent you an email because you took some classes and you're
Yes.
still a student. And I want to hear about what you're working on in school now. And you're a teacher and you're a writer. I mean, and you're a father and
Yes.
you're a husband.
Yeah.
So you have a lot going on, Kevin.
Yeah. I was just thinking about that today. I'm like, how am I it? And sometimes the answer is like, I don't know. I tell students, like, find time for what you want to do, and make time for that. And we just had a really quick fake news versus real news unit, kind of social media addiction thing in journalism class. And I asked students how long they spend on their phones, and the average time I got back was over 10 hours a day. And I said, well, think about what you could be doing with those minutes and hours otherwise, right? So, over time, I've really monitored that and kind of put my phone in the charger when I get home and spend time with the kiddos now and make that and just solely focus on the dad. Put the work away, which when you start as a teacher, you can't separate yourself from the work. And I put that away, focus on that. And then when the kids go to bed, I spend time with the wife. And then I have a little bit of time after that to focus on neighborhood watch. And then when I get up really early, I focus on just writing and reading. So it's just a cycle. It's a routine. I like routines. And I think that's what just keeps me going.
So Dr. Amy, he makes this sound so simple. It reminds me of when I was working on my doctorate degree, and I had a similar schedule because I was teaching of when I was at work, when I got home to cook for the family, when I spent time with the kids, put them to bed early. I would take a nap till like 4 a.m. Then I would get up and work. I would take a nap from 8 p.m. to midnight, and then I would work from noon to 4 a.m. And then I would take a nap, like either 4 or 5 to 6 o'clock. And that was my schedule while I was working on my doctorate degree, which takes a lot of discipline. Looking back, I look and say, how could I have ever done that? But, I was very motivated at the time. So I'm interested. So that kind of discipline needs a lot of motivation. Where do you find this motivation to keep up with that kind of schedule? And I have a personal question for you too. Does your wife know that she's on a schedule?
Now don't throw him under any buses.
That's really kind of funny. Well, she's really good. She's really busy too. She's on her own schedule. So, she's a very supportive person. She's on maternity leave right now, and she's an excellent mother, excellent wife. She's supportive of everything I do. But as far as the motivation goes, a lot of it, when you get up early, and I think you can attest to this, Dr. Joy, when you were going through those odd hours, when you go to bed at night, like you think about what you do in the morning, like, and that kind of gives you that motivation to get up. And sometimes, like, if you have no plans, like, okay, like, what's the purpose to get up that next day? But my purpose is like, I get a quiet house in the morning and I get to write. And that's kind of cool to me to just be able to have that hobby, to have that space, which I'm still able to do with kids, with grad school, with working, and to still be able to find it, even if it's 20 minutes, and that's my motivation, to just have that quiet space and to create.
You talk about, I get to have this time to write. Tell us about your journey to writing a book. What did that look like?
Yeah, it's something it kind of was born out of high school gym class, which is really weird. I had a really, really good high school gym teacher, and it was I forget the name of the class now, but we did like rock climbing and roller skating and rollerblading, and we learned how to make a campfire and all that stuff, outdoor recreation. So one day he told us to make a bucket list of things we wanted to accomplish before we die. And one of the things was I wanted to write a book because from an early age, I loved writing. And so, I went the journalism path and things like that. And when I got older into my 20s, I had amassed all of this poetry, just all of this stuff from my early 20s and from EIU. And I just thought back to that moment. I said, well, what am I waiting for? I might as well just do it, and I was played on a recreation baseball team at the time. And the coach told me about this publishing site that I could go through and I could work with an agent and things like that. And I did it all myself. I designed the cover at that time. I worked with the agent on editing and all that stuff. And I was proud that I was able to start that and know what I was able to do. And going forward, it just kind of became this organic thing that one step at a time. And I did that then, and it turned into more. So
who would think that PE teacher would inspire you? And I'm listening as you were talking about that. I'm saying there must be a huge age difference here, Amy, because I do not ever recall having any kind of rock climbing in school. So speaking of age, how have you evolved since the book 20-something?
Yeah, I mean, at that age, I really didn't know what I wanted to do. Like, I got out of EIU and I thought I'd have the world figured out. I thought like I would have like my career set. Like, I thought I would know who I am. And I tell my students all the time, like, it's okay. Like, if you go on a path that is different, because, the 20s ended up being a very cool age for me. I traveled a lot. I've seen 48 of the 50 states and I've been everywhere. And I think because of those experiences helped me form who I am today. And I've been able to see a lot of different things that I incorporate into my books and to make those experiences. And I learned to just be okay with not being okay sometimes, which is not something I was okay with at the time. I felt more anxiety. I felt more unsure of myself. And now I am more sure of myself, because when I get to those points when I don't know what's going on, I'm just okay with it. It's like, okay, it'll be fine. And I have a very supportive wife. I have 2 great kids, and I'm very strong in my faith too. So at that time, it did help me to express it through writing, but now because of those experiences, the writing has totally changed.
How so?
So 20-something was basically about finding yourself and kind of being frustrated with the world and frustrated with myself, and just kind of getting those thoughts on paper. A lot of that was stream of consciousness poetry and just kind of getting it out and out there. The writing today was kind of having a broader understanding of how the world works, because I've lived that, and kind of reeling it in a little bit, while combining like my love for poetry in the past and using that as like figurative language and stuff in the books and stuff like that. So knowing that it's not all about me anymore. And I think when you're younger, you think it's all about you, and it's not all about you. And I think it takes maturity to get to that point. And it's also something that I've learned to help with my high school students, because sometimes when you're younger, you can't think outside of yourself. And so I think that was a path that I took from that first book to my current book.
Having had all of these different types of writing experiences and being on this journey, and writing in your personal life has to have affected or helped in your professional work. Talk to us a little bit about that.
There have been so many, before I got on this call, I was grading poetry essays, right? So I can see where students need to go to get to that next level. I can push student A, who's a very talented writer, student B, who needs to get to where student A is. And I can just spot those differences. And for one instance, I told student A, who's really strong with her writing. I said, you use very good evidence and analysis, but you have to work on knowing when to cut out certain words and when to elaborate on certain words. And that really takes a careful eye, and it takes practice, and it takes being able to grow up a little bit and understand when to be more concise. And I know she likes to read a lot, so I recommended in my feedback to her a couple of things that she could read to focus in on that. And one of them was Hemingway's Hills Like White Elephants, because I said he is a minimalist and he says a lot with little amount of words. So that's the kind of stuff where even the students that are the high flyers, I'll try to push them and say, this is what you can do to be an even better writer. And for the students that are not high flyers, I still encourage them, and I'll say, use spell check, and I'll show them how to use spell check, and I'll work on little things at a time. And then once they master that, then I'll get to the next thing.
Yeah, so your practical experience has really benefited your students. Let's talk about the book. Let's talk about your latest creation, Neighborhood Watch. Tell us a little bit about Neighborhood Watch and who was this book intended for?
Sure. So, I think this book is intended for basically two audiences. So it's kind of intended for the kid in all of us. When you grow up, you see all these different things that you go through, and just these easygoing days that we forget about, like playing in a creek. When if you're an adult, you're like, do you think that's disgusting? Or playing games at the park, which now when you're an adult, you take your kid to the park. And one of the things I really liked about it is that you see how the town and the kids age over the course of the novel. So it's intended for adults mainly because you can see how adults act versus kids act. And there are some suggestive scenes in it. But it's also intended for us to kind of examine who we are and, the kinds of things that we're doing to each other and the kind of standards that we're putting out there, because what do we want for perfection? There's that difference between the woods that are in the book, which is just total freedom and where everything can be fun and everything. And then there's the town, which tries to restrict freedom, and everybody is trying to be perfect, but it's obviously not. So it's really tended to a more adult, advanced audience so they can understand both worlds.
We are talking to Kevin Kenealy, a writer, journalist, teacher. What else do you do in those 3 minutes that you have not scheduled of your day?
So I'm a huge Lego buff. It's something else that I really enjoy that just kind of takes my mind off things. So I have a whole Harry Potter world that I've designed, and right now I'm working on Star Wars world. So that's something I really enjoy, and I'm a huge baseball nut. I try to watch the White Sox as much as I can. I don't know. Aside from that, I try to keep up with my health a little bit. My wife, Mary Ellen, and I try to exercise as much as we can on the bike, and we'll watch a show while we're on there. But other than that, the rest of the day is pretty taken up.
You see how he had to make that exercise very productive. We'll watch something while we're exercising because you have to use up all of those minutes productively.
Yes.
I get you. To your students and to your peers, the other teachers, are you a celebrity to them? How do they see you? And how has your being at Crete Monique benefited them?
You
got to brag a little bit. You're very modest.
It's just kind of a weird thing for me to think of myself like that right now, because I'm still trying to make it, right? I'm still trying to get out there. I don't consider myself like on the level of a established writer. I have had people come up to me like in awe, like saying stuff like that. And I just kind of feel weird about it because I think the world of them is educators and students. And So, even if I did, which would be great if I reached the level of a Stephen King or something, I don't think I would see myself any differently than anyone else. I don't think they see myself any differently, because when I step into these shoes, like, I am an educator in the building, and students do find out, they think it's amazing, and then I go on to teach. So I try to code switch there. So I don't know.
I don't know if that's really a code switching situation. You've talked so much about what you're bringing into the classroom, helping students, directing them to what they can read for their own inspiration. And speaking of Stephen King, he has a book called On Writing.
I've read that. Yep.
Have you thought about writing a book about how to write, and maybe including stories that you've shared with your own students? Or what do you do to capture these ideas that you have about how to write?
Yeah, so I have a blog. I do write things about reading and writing. But yeah, that is an interesting idea. Right now I do have another novel finished. It's in the editing process. But yeah, that is an interesting idea. I do have a lot of things to say about that, just in my personal career, through journalism, through fiction writing, through working with my students. I've done every writing capacity pretty much that you can think of, and so I would have a lot to say about it. But yeah, in the interim, I write that stuff on my blog when I get a chance.
Very, very good. We'll make sure we include those tidbits. I think that that's really special. Tell us about, you said you're finishing a project now. Tell us a little bit about that project.
Yeah, so I'm excited about this one. It's fun because I get to juggle marketing, Neighborhood Watch, and working on this. This one I work on in the morning. It's called Crash and Burn. So it's in the same vein as like a Gone Girl or something like that. It's another thriller. And the book starts out where this house burns down, and this woman is in a panic because her husband runs off with their newborn. And so there's police on the set, and she tells this detective, and the first half of the book is they're after this man. And so the first half, we get the woman's story about what's happening, and she's with the detective looking for him. And then the second half, we find him, and we get his perspective on what happened. And then the last half, everything comes together. And so you never really know what to expect. The crash and burn is kind of a symbolism for, obviously, the house crashes and burns, but what happened to their marriage. Is there more to the story than what's being told on both sides? And we don't find out until the end. So
you said earlier that you really encourage your students to be eyes wide open, be observant. And as I'm listening to you talk about this book, there are other things too, besides just being observant to get inspiration. You're talking about having two different perspectives in the book, and all of these other elements that are inspiring to me. Where do you draw your inspiration?
Yeah, I mean, so many different places. I read a news story the other day that will probably turn into at least a short story about a taxidermist, and he wanted to preserve his wife. So he stuffed his wife and left her on the couch, and a pizza delivery man came by and knocked on the door. She fell over. And truth is stranger than fiction. And so I saw a picture of him with the article. I mean, he totally looks like a serial killer, like stone faced, so I'm like, I wrote that down as a note. That's being done as something. But yeah, I mean, the news, certain things I see in the world, and definitely things I read. I do try to read every day something because things come out of it.
Right. So you try to be relative of what's going on today. That's a great place to draw your inspiration, so that it's real. Maybe not our reality, but we all enjoy that fantasy, right? So we all enjoy escaping.
Mhm.
I appreciate you giving me a bit of fantasy. I really enjoyed the book and cannot wait. I never imagined myself reading this type of book because I don't
Mhm.
think that I have time for fun,
Yeah.
and just for pure entertainment. But I appreciate it, and I appreciate you for putting this out in the world.
Yeah, I mean that was my initial. You asked about my purpose. My goal is to just share it with others, and as many people as I can, because I think other authors hope that they put a lot of work and effort into it, and
Mm-hmm.
I hope they get something different than maybe I was seeing in it. So,
Do you have any last tips to share with teachers or students who have that urge inside them, those words inside them? Where is their starting point? How do they get those out and maybe share them with the world?
I.e., Dr. Amy.
yeah, I mean, just don't be afraid. Like I think a lot of people are afraid to share their stuff, or they have writer's block, and the best thing to do is just write down gibberish, and it comes from there. But yeah, if writing is so freeing, it's one of the best things. And I tell students all the time, like, well, just write anything down. And they do, and it comes out, and they really enjoy it, and they can't wait to share with me what they have. And so, I mean, I guess that's the best tip. I do have a couple of things as far as tips go on the website, on the blog, but that's the best starting point, is to just have fun with it, because the moment you stop having fun with it, it becomes like work, and it shouldn't be work. It should be fun first and foremost.
Kevin, you started this interview talking about that inspiration, that little tidbit from that PE teacher. And I can
Yeah.
only imagine how many future writers that you are inspiring, and they're going to say, hey, this guy named Kevin Kenealy.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I hope so. I mean, yeah, I mean, as I took on a student teacher from GSU, and it's the first time I had a student teacher, and I know that he's still interested in teaching. So in a way, I feel like now I'm helping her students because I've helped her. So that makes me feel really, really good to be able to train that teacher. And so I was really grateful I was able to do that.
Well, we look forward to having you mentor more students from Governor State University, because I know they will be inspired and have very thoughtful mentorship just working with you. This has been really fun. I am so glad you were able to join us today.
Well, thanks for having me. This has been great.
Thank you for listening to Teaching and Leading with Dr. Amy and Dr. Joy. Visit our website at govst.edu/teaching and leading podcast to see the show notes from this episode.
We appreciate Governor State University's work behind the scenes to make publishing possible. Stay tuned for more episodes with Dr. Amy and Dr. Joy.